All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. Got a great show lined up tonight. I'm joined by Noah Church. Noah, welcome.
Good to be here.
And we've got a great discussion tonight. I wanted to have Gary Wilson on the show a couple of months ago to discuss this topic. And Gary Wilson had been on the Gnostic Media podcast and RBN show a couple of times about, 5 years ago now. And, this topic keeps coming up, and the damage that pornography does never ceases to end. And we had Mark Janssen on the show a month and a half, 2 months ago, talking about his experiences and impact that, pedophilia and whatnot had caused in his life. And then last week we had Dr. Cretella on, who discussed the impact that transgender is having on families and how it's child abuse. And the pornography thing is kind of right in there amongst all of that, and sort of, it promotes a lot of things on a lot of levels that I want to get into tonight with you. But Gary had sent me your contact information, and you've come out as a leader in helping men with porn addiction and whatnot. So anyway, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Don't want to get too long-winded there. And you've actually got a book which we titled the show after tonight, which is called Wack, Addicted to Internet Porn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wrote that book back in 2014, and that's when I first met Gary Wilson as well, and we became friends after that, worked together for a long time. And yeah, it was a topic that was near and dear to my heart and my life because I, as a child, got exposed to pornography way too young, 9 or 10 years old, and it became a big part of my life without me realizing that it was detrimental or harmful to my health, my social well-being, my relationships. I didn't fully make that connection until I was 24, and that's when I decided to quit and ended up writing that book.
Now, so what was the thing that really got you to start waking up and realizing there was a problem?
Well, we call it porn-induced erectile dysfunction, if you've ever heard of that. And I had never heard of it when I first experienced it. I was 18 years old at the time, and I had my first serious girlfriend. We were in love with each other. We, wanted to be together. We wanted to be each other's first, and no matter how much I was attracted to her, how much I cared about her, my body just didn't seem to agree with that, and I was incapable of having sex, and I didn't know why. It was really distressing for me because this had been something I'd been looking forward to my whole life, something I'd wanted my whole life, and yet here I was, and it seemed impossible for me. And I didn't know why. I searched for answers, the only place I felt safe doing so, which was the internet. I didn't want to ask anybody in my life because I was ashamed of what was happening. So I searched for answers on Google. And back then in 2008, all I found was that if it wasn't a physical problem, I didn't have a disease or a disorder, then it must be psychological, nerves, performance anxiety. And I knew it wasn't physical because I could get it up just fine for pornography. So I figured, okay, I just need time to get comfortable, actually being intimate with another person. But no matter how many times we tried, nothing helped. And eventually, I just got so distressed about it that it really poisoned our relationship. And I took the love and the joy out of it because every time I was with her, that's all I could think about was how broken I was. And so I ended that relationship, and the pattern repeated over the next several years with more partners
Wow.
until I was 24, and my light bulb moment was actually seeing Gary Wilson's TED Talk called The Great Porn Experiment. And in it, he describes the effects on the brain and one's sexual health that long-term pornography use can have, especially internet pornography use, and recounts the stories of hundreds and thousands of guys who had experienced very similar um, events that I had experienced. Either they lost the ability to have sex, maybe after a breakup, they started using more and more porn, and then the next time they found themselves in a relationship, they couldn't have sex anymore. Or like me, they couldn't have sex the first time that they tried. And these men found each other online, realized that they all had pornography use in common, and experimented with themselves to quit and see if they could heal themselves and get that ability back to enjoy actual satisfying sexual experiences with the partner. And they found that that PIED, as we called it, was reversible. And so that's when I decided to quit pornography forever and undertake that journey.
Wow, that's an impressive personal story. Thanks for sharing that. Has it been empowering for you to come out being honest about your own journey?
Yeah, definitely. And I've talked about it enough at this point that it's not really uncomfortable for me anymore. At the beginning, yeah, it was. This has never been anything I had talked to anyone about, much less a public audience. But at the time, the first person I told about this whole thing was my girlfriend at the time, my new girlfriend, and she was very understanding and supportive. And then I told some of my friends, I told my family, and gradually started working through it. And the journey was very powerful for me, and it became much more than just getting my erections back. That was the symptom that was most obvious that got me distressed and knowing that I needed to quit porn. But throughout the process of quitting, I realized that porn had a lot of other impacts on my life that I only realized once they started to reverse. So eventually I decided I needed to get this information out there. When I was 18, looked for these answers and found no information that could really help me. And I didn't want other young men who were experiencing the same thing to search and find nothing. So I figured I didn't want all those years to be a waste. I wanted to turn them into something good, something that could, help others get over their own problems or avoid them in the first place.
We are having a little bit of issue with your Zoom settings, auto adjusting your microphone volume. So I'm pretty sure it's happening on your end, though, because I don't know what to do about it. If you can find the setting and shut it off, I wouldn't worry about it and waste your time, though. We'll just have to
Okay. Do
deal
you have
with
any
it.
idea where that would be?
If you go down under
Audio settings?
yeah, audio settings, and then it's I'm showing the world there where the settings are, but let's see. Yeah, it's under, it'd be under audio settings, and then you uncheck the automatically adjust
All right.
volume.
Yeah, I just unchecked it. Is that better?
Yeah, that should take care of it. Usually does.
Apologies
Thanks.
for that.
No worries. Yeah, it's a terrible setting. All right, so what other areas did you realize that pornography was affecting?
Well, a lot of guys experience a variety of things when they quit pornography. Some guys fall into an immediate depression, so what we call flatline, complete loss of libido. Other guys go through withdrawal symptoms like anxiety, panic attacks, insomnia, things like that. For me, at the beginning, I actually felt great because I was so filled with hope. For the first time in a long time, I saw light at the end of the tunnel. I saw what the problem was finally, and I saw that I really had potential to actually have the kind of relationship I wanted. And so that carried me through a lot of the initial difficulties that I think other guys face. But within a few weeks to a couple of months, I started noticing other things. I noticed that I just enjoyed my life more. Like I was less needing to distract myself or escape or disengage from my life. I enjoyed just spending time with people, talking with them. Before, I might feel awkward or feel like I just wanted to get a conversation over with and go back home and relax. But now I was just able to enjoy the present moment. I was more confident, just a happier person in general. And I felt like color was kind of coming back into the world.
Wow.
And my emotions were returning because I didn't cry, okay, for a single time between the ages of 10 and like 23. And that was, the time
From 10
period.
to 23.
Yeah, not a single time. And that was
Wow.
the time period in which I was using porn. And I didn't think it was a problem at the time. I think I was kind of proud of it, the stereotypical masculine, no emotions, don't cry. But I now realize looking back that a lot of it was due to me being desensitized because pornography, and especially internet pornography, is supernaturally or supernormally stimulating. Like the part of our brain that processes sexual stimuli it doesn't recognize that what's on the screen isn't real, right? It just sees, okay, sexual opportunity, attractive mates, let's get aroused. But what we can see on the computer screen is 1,000 times more varied and potent than what humans would see throughout human evolutionary history, right? And just
Right.
living lives. And so that blasts our brain with
Yeah,
overstimulation.
yeah. 100 years ago, somebody might see that once or twice in their lifetime, much less thousands of times in an hour, for instance, right?
Yeah, you can pull up 20 tabs and have a bunch of different videos going, compilation videos, and see, a lifetime's worth of sex acts and sex partners all in a sitting. And that's more than our brains are really equipped to handle. And so to adapt to that, it sort of numbs itself. That whole system of sexual response numbs itself and becomes less sensitive. And that's why we see guys who get hooked on porn often escalating to more extreme content, because the old stuff just doesn't do it for them anymore. They overstimulated themselves, they're shutting down, they're getting more numb. And to get the same rush, they got to find something new and more exciting. And we see that in all types of addictions, alcoholics who start with a few beers, getting them buzzed. Now they need a fifth of Jack Daniels, or drug use, going to greater quantities of drugs or more potent drugs. And all of this doesn't just affect what we respond to sexually, because our brain and our body and our self is holistic. It affects our whole lives and our experience of life. That part of ourself that feels desire, that feels impulse, that feels want for something, that doesn't just respond to sexual stimuli, but things in our life that motivate us, our ambition, pursuing relationships and friendships, developing ourselves, just wanting to eat or engage in a passion project or learn. So all of that was sort of numbed for me, and it didn't prevent me from living my life while I was using porn. I was still, able to get by just fine. I was a functional addict for sure, but everything was sort of grayed out. And when I quit porn, those colors started to pop back in. And I remember sitting in the back of my family car. My family was driving and I was in the back seat. And this news story came on the radio about a murder that had happened. And I just started tearing up and crying. And that hadn't happened to me in forever. And I've realized that I was just reconnecting with who I should be and coming back to what didn't feel like normal, but was normal.
Lewis in the chat just made a really interesting point. He says, "I still hate having the porn images on my mind."
Mm-hmm.
What can you say about that? I mean, some of this stuff imprints on your mind long term, and you can't get, it's hard to get it out of your memory. What do you have to say to that?
Well, I absolutely agree. Whenever we get a shot of adrenaline, and we do get adrenaline when we see pornography, especially when it's for the first time or something new, something especially exciting, that cements that experience in our memory, and we're much more likely to remember it in vivid detail. And I remember, many things that I saw very vividly. I don't ponder them anymore. I don't really think about them anymore. And I can assure you that time does make it easier. When I first quit, for the first 6 months, I had dreams all the time that I was using pornography. And I would wake up in a cold sweat, just terrified that I had used pornography again, and then just like gasp with relief that it was just a dream.
Wow.
But that does get better over time. The longer, the more distance we have between pornography and our present selves, the easier it becomes and the less pull it has on us. Now we have to remember forever the lessons that we learned that allowed us to get porn free, because if you become addicted to it, every addict I've worked with uses pornography as an emotional crutch, as a way to escape, to numb themselves, to not think about their problems, to relax, to, when they feel lonely or depressed or anxious, they can use porn and feel better for a while. But of course, afterward, they usually feel worse because they didn't actually solve the problem. And so you really have to learn how to overcome that and deal with those emotions in a more positive, healthy way, to truly leave pornography behind, because you can not feel any urges for pornography for a long time. If you're living a great life, you're happy every day, and that's what we should aim for. But when you go back to that low point, you have a breakup, you lose your job, family member dies, whatever, and you're feeling those hard feelings, it's very easy to be vulnerable and go back to pornography. And, that happened to me. I didn't go my whole journey without relapse, but after going through relapse, usually from about month 10 to month 20, on and off, it was a whole process of relearning exactly what I needed to remain porn free. And since I was able to leave it behind me permanently, and since I became a coach helping others do the same, it's only gotten easier and easier. And pornography or the possibility of using it hardly ever crosses my mind anymore.
What are the signs you could tell someone who's addicted to porn other than just using porn at all?
Mm-hmm. Well, addiction is misunderstood in a lot of ways. A lot of people think it's about frequency of use. It's not. You can be an addict and only use something, once a year. Or honestly, I still consider myself an addict, even though I don't use it at all, because that potential for that addictive behavior is still inside me. And if I were to go back to it or slip or forget what I had learned that allowed me to rise above it, then I could easily go back into that same cycle again. But what addiction really is, in its most simple definition, is a behavior, indulging in something, whether it be a substance or an activity, that you realize has negative effect on your life, causing negative consequences. And you decide you want to stop, reduce, or limit, or completely stop your use, and you find it very difficult or impossible to do so. If that happens, then you may be dealing with an addiction.
What do you say to people who are still only thinking about quitting porn?
Well, if you're thinking about it, then there's no reason not to try it out for a certain period of time. I mean, you don't have to commit to being porn free for life if you're not sure that that's what you want yet. If you think it might be a problem or might not, then give it a few months. If you can't go a few months, if it's extremely difficult, then it probably is a problem. If you can easily and don't notice really any difference in your life, then maybe pornography never was a problem for you. I'm not one who wants to ban pornography completely. I don't think that would be productive. I want to get this information out there. I want people to be aware of the potential harms of pornography on themselves, on their children, on society, on relationships, so that they can spot when those harms may be coming about in their lives, and they can make informed decisions. And I also want to protect minors, people under 18, from exposure to that content, because they're not mature enough to make those decisions yet.
What do you say to people that are hearing your message for the first time and have never considered that porn was damaging? I've had friends that have told me they didn't even ever think that porn was damaging or had any problems. One poster just said, "You're really a cuck watching porn. Think about it."
Yeah. I mean, what is a cuckold? Is someone whose wife or lover is, being, I don't know. What's your language policy on this podcast?
Go for it. I mean, here they're warned. So there you go. Kids, cover your ears for a second. Kane, cover your ears.
You're watching the woman who is yours or whom you covet being fucked by another man, right? And that's what pornography is. And it doesn't lead to any positive outcomes in most cases. Some people say pornography has been a positive influence in my life, or it helps me and my partner get aroused together. Right. I'm not going to say that that's impossible. I'm not going to tell you that that's not true if that's your experience, but it certainly hasn't been mine. I don't have a single cherished memory of using pornography.
Let me just to put this in context. So you're taking this sacred act between you and your spouse, and then you're bringing voyeurism into it, essentially, and it's like using a window into somebody. Your computer screen becomes a window into somebody else's bedroom to then watch their acts. And then so now it's not just the images of you and your spouse, but it's the images of other people in there. And so then it's like, I mean, then you can, it just goes into multiple partner. I mean, you can see how it would expand out and just be detrimental to the sacredness of what was that private relationship between a man and a woman.
We've known for decades that exposure to pornography has a variety of impacts on one's perception of relationships and of their partner. People who watch pornography generally view their partner as less attractive, their relationship as less sexually fulfilling, or are more likely to view sexual promiscuity as a positive thing. But in my experience, the people who believe these things, this doesn't lead to happiness. And pornography trains us to be dissatisfied. It trains us to always be seeking for something new, always be hungry, always be searching, always looking for that next best thing. And no matter how much we know consciously in our minds that everything on the screen is just fantasy, it's not a big deal, subconsciously it is training us. It is changing our sexual template. And it does definitely affect our real relationships.
Brian asks, is masturbation without watching porn still porn? That's an interesting question.
Well, it can be. I mean, the guys who I work with, here's what I tell them about masturbation. I say, especially if you're recovering from a porn-induced sexual dysfunction and you want that to happen as fast as possible, you're with a partner, I advise cutting out masturbation as well, allowing your only sexual outlet to be with your partner. And that forces you to adapt more quickly because we're sexual beings. We want a sexual outlet. If our only avenue for that is real sex with our real partner, then that's going to happen more quickly. If a guy does want to masturbate, say he's single for a long time and wants to leave porn behind, wants to heal, but doesn't want to be a monk, be completely abstinent, then I would tell him, okay, if that's what you want, just be sure that when you are masturbating, you're not thinking about pornography, remembering pornography scenes, because our imagination is very powerful, and visualizing pornography is much the same as watching pornography, especially once you've already developed those problems. So if you do it, if you want to fantasize about something realistic, first person, it's you in a realistic situation. And yeah, don't remember or fixate on what porn trains you to find arousing.
Somebody asked about making your own porn. So what if it's you and your spouse making your own?
Well, what do you do with it?
I don't know. Well, I guess I guess you'd use it in the same way, right? So is it the same effect, or if it's just between you and your spouse?
Well, there's a variety of effects that we're talking about. If you wanted to record sexual intercourse between you and your partner and watch it later or masturbate to it, I'm not going to tell you not to do that. I'm not going to tell you that's going to be super harmful for you. What we see in internet pornography, where the problem lies, is that it's an unlimited ocean of novelty. You can find anything. There's always something new to go to. It never has to get old.
Right. So it's just something click, 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 click. It's not just you and your spouse. That's the main problem, apparently, right?
Yeah. I mean, before the internet came about and porn became widely and freely available, people still sometimes develop problems with over masturbation, compulsive masturbation, absolutely. But for the most part, most people get bored after a little while. They masturbate a couple of times and they're like, okay, well, it's kind of boring now. I'm going to go on with my life, do other things. But pornography allows us to always find something more stimulating and push past that natural boredom barrier and take it to extremes that we wouldn't otherwise go to.
Now, John says porn should be banned like it is in China and Russia, countries that aren't trying to exterminate their own people. China banned rap. Smart.
I don't really have a comment on that. Like I said, I'm not for banning pornography.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to happen. So I don't see the point in pursuing it. And if we ban it, it's just going to go underground,
What about, and somebody else said England is apparently banning porn too.
That's not true. What they did is pass legislation that requires actual age verification for people who want to access those sites. So they'll have to go to a third-party website that will verify their identity and their age and then send a check mark yes to the pornography website so they can access that material. So they're not banning pornography. They're just, like in the US here with gambling websites, we do the same thing. So the infrastructure is already there. But instead of just clicking, yes, I am 18 when you're 12 and want to see porn, you'd have to actually go through that process.
No, I think it's gotten better, but it used to be when you did a Google search, if you were searching washing machines or something, you would get, porn showing up. Is that changed now, or has that gotten better? I mean, is it still the same?
Uh, I mean, I think we've all experienced accidentally encountering pornography or erotic content on the internet. That's just a fact of the internet. And yes, uh, some of the applications have gotten better at screening that. And there are plenty of applications out there that you can install on your own devices to help filter that out. But we have to understand that it's going to happen anyway. That exposure is going to happen. And we have to understand that that's going to happen with our kids. They're going to encounter this content.
Yeah, what is the impact on an 8 or 9 year old when they search Google and get porn back? What is the detrimental long term impact of a young child seeing that? And that's something that they normally never would have seen in all of history. They might have walked in on their parents or been victims of some act or something, but they're not going to do a search on Google and just see, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are a variety of potential impacts. And myself, I was 9 when I first saw pornography, and I remember it very clearly. I remember starting, and I was hooked right away. It was the time when we're still on dial-up. People weren't really aware of the dangers. Parents weren't talking to their kids about pornography, so no one had ever talked to me about it. And I got hooked. I ended up with sexual dysfunction. It broke a lot of my relationships. It broke my self-esteem for a long time. I became addicted. And many of the other guys I work with have the same experiences. And the earlier one is exposed, the greater the risk of these problems developing.
All right, so why don't we start taking some more questions from the audience on this stuff? You ready for that, or are there some more key points that we should go into before we hit that?
Yeah, there's another key point I have
All
that came to
right,
mind,
and
which,
feel free to dive deep into whatever you want to as well. But
all right,
and if people want to post up some questions, throw up some super chats, we appreciate it. A couple of donations from John and Anthony. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you supporting the show. So anyway, yeah, go for it.
but wanted to talk a little bit more about tolerance and escalation. Like I said, we grow numb to what we start out seeing. Like when I first started, just pictures of pretty ladies. They didn't even have to be naked would be more than enough for me.
Yeah, when I was a kid, your dad ordered a Playboy or a Penthouse magazine, and
Mm-hmm.
that was pretty much the scope of it. If you found the magazines, you might see, you know, 5, 10, 20, 30 girls in these magazines, but
Yeah.
totally different even, and that was still detrimental, I'm sure.
Yeah, nowadays there's everything you can imagine and much more that you can't imagine on the internet. And as one grows their tolerance and they either seek out or just are exposed to things, because on these websites there's always recommended things. There's things in the sidebar, things you've never seen before, and you're always constantly exposed to new genres, new images, and people escalate. Even if a genre or a type of scene at first disgusted them or weirded them out, eventually a lot of them seek that out because they need something more extreme. And
Wow.
there's this common story that a lot of people take for granted, that uh, we can find out about our true sexual tastes and sexual nature by seeing what turns us on in pornography. But that ignores the potential of pornography to actually shape and mold and condition our sexuality into liking things that we never would have liked otherwise. And so I see a lot this end in a lot of extreme places that cause people a lot of distress, where their sexuality is completely alien to them, to how they feel it naturally should be, and they're always checking themselves. They're wondering who they are. They're confused. They're lost. And what I try to reassure them about is that most often this is reversible. Step away from pornography, become porn free, and our brain tends to return to a more natural balance. And those more extreme interests that we might have developed, they might disappear entirely. They might just fade into the background. And whatever we were attracted to before becoming conditioned by porn tends to come back to the surface.
Interesting. Dwayne asks, what about porn being used as an outlet for otherwise violent sexual deviance? And that raises the question of the cart before the horse, right? Which comes first, the violent sexual deviant, or the porn or something that makes the violent sexual deviant? What do you have to say to this whole topic?
Well, like I said, pornography is very good at making you hungrier, getting you to want more. it's not good at actually satisfying you. It's frustrating. It tantalizes you. It teases you. And I've never seen, feeding an extreme desire end up with a good outcome. It always leads to more and more and more. And I see articles all the time about child sexual abuse among children, child sexual abuse by children to children on the rise. And a lot of the people who are firsthand, the nurses, the doctors, are noticing that the commonality here is that these children are exposed to violent pornography, and they're learning from this. And you go on these websites now, and it's not just two young lovers having a great time. It's rough, it's extreme, it's abusive, it's degrading. A study from 2015, I think, found that in 88% of the most popular pornography scenes were displayed violence towards women. And this is either like gagging, slapping, hitting, pushing around, hair pulled, choking, things like this. This is all mainstream now. This is what you find on the front page of any website. And so, it's my belief and my experience that I think the entire audience at large is becoming more tolerant and escalating and desiring more and more extreme content. And that's why all this that used to be like unheard of illegal snuff films and stuff like that is now what we call hardcore. And what we used to call hardcore is softcore. And what we used to be softcore is nothing. It's on the billboard outside.
Oh, wow. All right. Well, this makes for the next great question here. More Superior Wear asks, hey, Jan, great topic. Doesn't it make the general public docile?
Well, I can speak from personal experience that it basically castrated me. It took away not only my ability to have a real satisfying intimate relationship, but a lot of my drive and ambition and focus as well. And most of the men that I work with who are able to become porn free notice that they're more fully living their lives. They care more about their lives, about their ambitions, and they're not, like you said, docile anymore. So I don't know that that's an intentional purpose of the pornography industry, but it is a consequence.
Let's see. Have you made a link between semen retention, the chrism, and depression?
Semen retention, what?
This is Alberta asks, have you made the link between semen retention, the chrism, and depression?
I don't know what the chrism is.
Essentially ejaculation, I think.
Okay. Semen retention is something that I normally don't talk much about. It's something that's talked about a lot on like the NoFap platform, if you've heard of that. I focus mostly on the effect of pornography and not the effect of masturbation without pornography. I think that everyone will benefit by experimenting with abstinence from all orgasm and semen retention and seeing how it affects them. And most adult men especially have never gone more than a week or two without an orgasm, and you can't really know yourself if that's the case. Abstaining for a longer period of time can teach you a lot about yourself. It can teach you that your sexuality does not control you. You can control your sexuality. It can teach you a lot of self-discipline and teach you a lot about who you are and what you're capable of and what your real sexuality is. It's like fasting. I think everyone should fast if there's no medical contraindication, because it teaches you a lot about your body. If you go without food for a week, most people have never done that, and it can teach you a lot about what your actual hunger and appetite is, and allow you to disassociate yourself from your immediate impulses.
Well said. Mrs. Ostrich asks, have you studied the erotica aimed at young girls such as Flowers in the Attic? These books were available in our junior high library.
I've not studied them specifically. I'm aware of them. I've looked at some of them. Erotica has been around for a long time. It's very popular, especially among women. It's a huge industry, very profitable. And a lot of women tend to, and this is a general rule, it's not applying in every instance, but a lot of women tend to gravitate more toward pornography or erotica with a story, and more men tend to be more visual, just get right into the sex. Now, again, general rule, but not at all applying to everyone. I've worked with plenty of women who got hooked on the same type of pornography that men do, and plenty of men who get hooked on erotica. But in a similar way to the type of pornography that we see on the internet now, erotica is designed to be supernormally stimulating, a lot of it. It's not, realistic love story. It's not literature. It's designed to activate that part of ourselves that is impulsive, that wants to read more, that wants to pursue. And if people get hooked on that, and I've seen them get hooked on it, then it can have a lot of the same consequences as being hooked on pornography.
Yeah. And I want to go into your comment about women getting addicted to the same type of porn and things like that. But I wanted to mention first, and you kind of pointed this out, but one person, Irk the psycho activist, says, have you noticed that yearly porn becomes more depraved, even the seemingly straightforward, semi-mainstream stuff, not even strange fetish stuff, has gotten more depraved and debased? Even the porn stars commenting on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been a while since I've looked at the porn directly, but I see what the most popular searches and categories are. And a lot of the most popular stuff is things like incest, non-consensual sex, things like that, are considered by mainstream society to be extreme, to be deviant, but now are becoming more and more normal because of pornography. And people who go to pornography first without ever, having seen it before, young kids, people who are searching on their own or just linked to it by a friend, something like that, all of a sudden they're faced with all these things that are now being portrayed as normal to them. And so the whole sexual template of our society is changing.
Wild stuff. All right. So let's see. Tony asks, you use the term using pornography. Is porn addiction mentally similar to opiate addiction or drug addiction in general?
So I work by the American Society of Addiction Medicine's definition of addiction, which is that it's a singular disorder, no matter what the object of it is, whether it's a substance like opiates, cocaine, or a behavior like gambling, sex, pornography. And we know that there are the same brain changes, very similar brain changes across addictions. Now, of course, each type of substance and each type of behavior has slightly different effects on the brain, and especially substances vary more wildly. But commonly across all addictions, we see mainly four, and that's sensitization, number one, which means that people who are become addicted are more sensitive to cues that lead to that addiction. So like a cocaine user, their brain will light up when they see coke. A pornography addict, his brain will light up to a much greater degree when he sees pornography than someone who is not addicted. Now that person's brain will also light up because it's sexual imagery, it's interesting, they're inspired to look at it, but they're not addicted. Sensitization is what happened to me. It's what happens to all pornography addicts. It means that when I would turn on the computer, open up a private browser window, my heart would already be beating and I'd already be, aroused before even seeing pornography because I was sensitized to all the cues that led to pornography use. And the second one is desensitization, which is the tolerance thing. It's overstimulation, meaning that we numb ourselves, we're less stimulated by what we see, and we need to seek out more and more extreme stuff. And also we're less stimulated by the rest of our lives. Everything becomes less interesting. The third is hypofrontality, which means that there's a weakened connection between the prefrontal cortex and the brain, the part of us that is human, is logical, can foresee consequences, can plan, can think rationally, and the part of ourself that is impulsive, that sees something and wants it, that feels desire and acts on that desire. And because that connection is weakened, it's like our brakes are cut, and addicts are much less able to control themselves, to recognize this is something bad, I'm not going to do this, and they just follow their impulses. And people looking on from the outside always think like, why can't this person just make the right decision? They said they wanted to quit. Why haven't they quit? It's because of hypofrontality. They are neurochemically and neurologically less able to control themselves. And the last would be altered stress circuits. meaning that, when a lot of people get anxious, get stressed, the healthy response would be to deal with whatever is making them anxious or stressed. Use that stress to focus on solving the problem. But addicts have dysfunctional stress circuits. When they feel stress, anxiety, their impulse is to use.
Well, somebody asks if porn is a psyop. I would say yes on many levels, but I don't want to get into a whole segue on that. What do you say on that?
A psyop,
Yeah.
like a conspiracy to control the public, or
Yeah. To dumb us down, to keep us docile and stupid and distracted.
I don't believe it, and I haven't seen evidence for it, but I don't disbelieve it either. I think that pornography would be there regardless of whether or not there's a conspiracy to use it for nefarious means. People are naturally curious about sex, and people know that they can profit off of making pornography and selling it. It's going to be out there.
All right. Anthony says porn, by its very nature, short circuits the natural progression of the harmony between the sexes through bypassing the building of a true, strong relationship between couples for instant, short lasting gratification of sex.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I experienced it in my own life. I now know, looking back, that I was incapable of actually loving a woman before I quit pornography. I thought that I was in love. That girlfriend I talked to you about when I was 18. I thought, okay, this must be what it feels like. But now that I know what it feels like after quitting porn, I know that I was not capable of it when I was using pornography.
Interesting. Well, there's a whole bunch of questions in here, so I'm just trying to scroll through and find some here. Somebody asks, "Is this live?" Yes, it's live. Let's see. I'm just trying. I had some other questions here. Anyway, post up your questions, folks. Post up any super chats. That also helps us see where the questions are, so it's not so hard to scroll through. Let's see here. What the heck? Where did the questions go? I'm looking for question marks. Speaking of altered stress, circumcision does that too. I wonder if there is any link between circumcision and porn addiction. That's an interesting concept right there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something that I wrote a little bit about in my book, actually.
And we should talk about your book too, here in a moment. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very against circumcision unless it's medically necessary.
Right.
It's a perfectly healthy part of the human body. There's no reason to cut it off, and there is evidence that shows that that is it provides sensation and also experience of sex and intimacy that may be lost to people who are circumcised. And from what I've read, there are receptors in that area of the penis that receive a neurochemical signal while during vaginal sex that leads to bonding, leads to a feeling of bonding and love. And that makes me really sad for guys who are circumcised, myself included.
Yeah. And what really gets me, sorry to segue onto this for a moment, but one of my aggravations is these feminists who will complain about, women getting circumcised in some third world country in Africa when half the population here still, or nearly half still, is victim of this crap,
Yeah, I mean, it's male genital mutilation. There's no way about it.
Yeah. They don't think it's the. I mean, how could it not be the same? It's absurd.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
And whether or not that leads to greater rate of addiction, I think it's possible. As someone who has left porn behind and experienced loving relationships now, I can say that being circumcised doesn't prevent me from feeling that love and feeling bonded to somebody. But I'll never know what it might have felt like different, And I think that
right.
the more research should be done on that.
Yeah, well, and I'm a father, and I did not put him through that trauma. I think it's just absolutely horrendous. Let's see. So Have you noticed incest porn being pushed extra tough right now?
I've seen it on the rise for several years. Yeah. And like I said, I don't go to the porn sites to see what's up now, but I see the most popular searches and such. And yeah, whatever is most taboo, it adds an emotion to the feeling of arousal. And when you're numb, when your tolerance is up, and you mix in another powerful emotion to sexual arousal, it can kick it up a notch, even if that emotion is negative, like stress or anxiety or disgust. And that a lot of addicts can come to need in order to kick that arousal up, that dopamine flood in their brain up to the point where they can get an erection and reach orgasm.
All right, so let's get over to your book. And they can get your book off of your website as well. There's his book, Wack.
Yeah, I actually give away the PDF for free to those who subscribe to my
And
newsletter.
what I'll do is I will post it in the chat right now for everyone too, so that they can download your book as well. And
yeah, it's at addictedtointernetporn.com, and you can find all my videos and other work there too.
And I'm going to post it in the video notes as well. I should have put that already. Sorry for not doing that. I'll get that done right this second. So, oh wait, actually, I did put that up there. Yeah, it is. It is in the. It is already in the show notes.
Cool.
So
yeah, the other thing I do now is I coach people personally through porn-related problems, and I've worked with hundreds of guys now and seen many people turn their lives around. And I didn't know that that's where I would be headed when I started this journey and wrote this book, but it felt like the natural progression, and it's been really educational and really inspiring to be able to be a part of those guys and women's recovery.
So, what is it? What is it like helping others through their porno addiction?
Most of the time, it's really fulfilling. I get to see someone when they might be at their lowest. I might be the first person they've told about these problems, and I can offer them understanding and support, and we can work through it together, come up with a plan of action, and get them to the point that they want to be in their life. And it tends to be a lot more than just about quitting pornography, because especially when an addiction is present, getting over that addiction is much more about what we add into our lives than what we take out. And we become addicted because we're trying to escape, because we are not having our true needs met. And when we get rid of whatever we're addicted to, those needs come back to the surface, and that can be really painful. It can lead to people wanting to numb out, to escape, to go back and use. But if we don't do that, if we listen to those needs, to those lacks, to those pains, then they can show us what we actually need to pursue in order to have a happier life. And that's what I spend a lot of time working with people on.
Now, when I had Gary Wilson on about 5 years ago, after the show, I got several hundred emails, mostly from men, from a few women as well, but it was probably 95% men discussing their, porn habits and seeking help. And, I don't have the, I wasn't prepared for that. This time I know it's going to happen at least, so at least I know, all right, if I'm doing this show, I know I'm going to get these emails. So at least I'm prepared for waking up tomorrow and seeing this stuff. But, it's a bit unnerving because, when you first start addressing this issue, strangers want to come up to you and tell you their sexual masturbatory habits,
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, you really do. So, so anyway, I'm going to encourage people to try to reach out to you, and I'll probably forward them over to you if they reach out to me or whatever. And I'll try to help those I can. But I'm sure you're going to, you probably get overwhelmed every time you do shows, don't you?
The emails, I can get behind on those, and that's stressful. But this is what I do now, full time. I used to have another job in the summer times fighting wildfires, but I'm retired from that now to do this full time. So.
Okay, so somebody says libido dominandi, promoting sexual liberation is a form of political control. How does porn fit into this program?
Well, I'll say about that is that those who associate pornography with sexual liberation or sex positivity, I'll quote my friend Gabe Deem, who runs rebootnation.org, which is that there's nothing more sex negative than a limp penis. And pornography doesn't promote, in most cases, I believe, a positive sexual experience. It leads to dysfunction in many cases, or even if it doesn't, it leads to dissatisfaction with your actual life and actual intimacy.
All right. Somebody, Dwayne asks, is burlesque an early form of pornography?
I mean, it's live, so there's that. That's not really within the definition of pornography. But pornography has been around for thousands of years, drawings on caves, wood carvings, stories, whatever. The difference now, there are several, is that there's unlimited content, unlimited access. It's all free, and it's accessible by anyone with a device that connects to the internet, including children. And that's what the title of Gary Wilson's TED Talk means, The Great Porn Experiment, is that we didn't really know all of the effects that pornography could have on people. And yet we unleashed it on the world, and the entire world is an experiment to see what effects does pornography have on us. And we're finding out now.
Right. Thought Out asks, who is the woman you most respect on planet Earth?
My mom.
You better say that, right? Let's see. A Nickelodeon machine, earliest porn. A crank picture show on the street. You crank it with both hands. The Nickelodeon Kids channel is a splat. Is it connected?
I don't know anything about that.
That's an interesting point, though. Somebody asked, who is your favorite porn star? My goodness. Let's see. Why do old men use Viagra? Well, because they are usually given statin drugs and have a low-fat, low-cholesterol diet, and that really messes up the testosterone levels in the body, which are made by cholesterol. Let's see. I'm just looking through here, seeing if there's anything else. Is there anything else you really want to dive into?
Well, you're talking to a vegan who eats no cholesterol, so.
I used to be a vegan, and it landed me in the ICU, and I've done about 20 shows on how dangerous it is. So we'll avoid that. We'll avoid that subject. But yeah, the brain and reproductive system are actually made out of cholesterol and burn saturated fats, and we see.
I thought we were avoiding the subject.
Yeah. So anyway,
gonna be a whole other show here.
Yeah, a whole nother show. All right. So, well, I guess, nobody else has any other questions that I see popping up. I really don't see anything else really good. I think we covered most of the stuff. So I guess that's it. I appreciate everybody's questions and support tonight. You want to give out your website and how people can reach you?
Yeah, once again, you can find me at addictedtointernetporn.com. I run a YouTube channel. I make videos answering questions. I write articles, and I work with people personally who want some personal guidance. You can also find my book there for free as a PDF. Just subscribe to my newsletter.
All right, great. And I was just showing that on screen for them at the same time. And we'll call that a wrap. Thanks so much for coming on tonight, Noah. This is a very important topic. I usually only review topics I've already done if they're extremely important and keep popping up. So I really appreciate you coming on and tackling this and being more so forthright with your own past and history. I'm sure that took a lot for you to come out the first couple of times to do that and stand out publicly and say, hey,
Yeah.
I'm a porn addict, or I was, or whatever, much less writing a book about it and showing your face.
Wasn't sure what to expect, but fortunately the reaction has been mostly really positive.
Yeah. Well, great. And thanks to you for doing it. All right. Well, that's a wrap. Thanks so much. Thank you, everybody in the audience tonight, and have a great night.
Thanks for the invite and the questions, guys.